By week's end, the president will have signed 32 executive orders. By the White House count, more than any president since World War II. And on Wednesday, the president will outline his tax reform ideas. But they are ideas only. They will not be in the form of legislation that Congress can actually consider.
And Major, President Trump's approval rating is at a record low when compared with his predecessors at this stage of their presidency. How important is a successful week for this administration's psyche and President Trump's political capital beyond day 100?
Psyche, I don't think it's very important because the president, as we all remember, came into office with comparatively low approval ratings. And those approval ratings have been low and steadily low throughout this entire now 95-day process of his presidency. And what the White House sees in that is some of the people who voted for the president in November are having second thoughts, but his core supporters are not. His core supporters do believe he is fulfilling many of the campaign promises he made, and they're willing to give him plenty of latitude and time to fulfill the others. Now, to the second part of your question, Earl, and it's very important. What about the political clout? This week, the White House has to avert a government shutdown, and it means negotiating with Congress to do that. Even though it's in Republican hands, many Republicans are not prepared at this moment to fight super aggressively on behalf of, for example, the president's request for $1.5 billion to begin construction of a wall on the U.S.-Mexico border. They want to defer that conversation for later. They're also not prepared to give the president all of the $30 billion in additional spending he's asked for the Defense Department. So the White House, because its political clout is not as robust as it would like, even with the Republican Congress, is going to have to make some compromises with Republicans and Democrats to avert a government shutdown, a shutdown that, if it were to transpire, would occur on precisely the 100th day of this administration. And I guarantee you, those are optics this White House will not tolerate and will not risk.
Indeed. Now, you also mentioned the president's expectation of unveiling a tax plan on Wednesday. What do we expect his broad principles in that proposal to be?
Well, the Treasury Secretary, Steve Mnuchin, was in the White House briefing room today, and he didn't say much, but he said on the personal income tax side, a sizable tax cut for middle-income Americans. We will see how exactly this administration defines who is or who is not, according to their classifications, a middle-income American, and tax simplification, meaning if you're an average American taxpayer, you can, according to the Treasury Secretary, in the future be able to file your tax form on a large, he said, postcard. We don't know how exactly simplified that's going to be. And on the business side, there are reports, and no one at the White House has, when I've asked, disagreed with these reports, that the president will seek a corporate tax rate reduction from 35%, where it currently is, to 15%. That would be a huge reduction in corporate taxes. And it would raise the question, inevitably, will that increase federal deficits? Today, the Treasury Secretary, Steve Mnuchin, said all of these tax reform ideas will be paid for by economic growth, signaling the White House will not look for so-called revenue-neutral tax increases to compensate for the projected loss of revenue. That experiment has been tried before. It was tried during the Reagan administration and to a lesser extent during George W. Bush's presidency. In each episode, deficits did increase.
And if we just step back and look at things overall, Major, the president is making very visible efforts to push for almost everything this week. Does he expect to get what he wants, or does this at the very least give him something to point to at his Saturday rally in Pennsylvania?
The White House this week is all about activity, not necessarily results. So it will be a busy place with lots of ideas either floated in the terms of tax reform or more requests for Congress to reconsider the repeal and replace of Obamacare. That legislation, I'm told, is moving along. The White House had hoped last week there could be a House vote this week. That vote will probably occur next week, but that's sooner than would have been anticipated, let's say, 3 weeks ago. So the White House will talk about its expectations there, try to set in motion a conversation on tax reform, and avert a government shutdown. And in the process, at least take credit for some down payments on the border wall, down payments on larger spending for the Pentagon, and say those are victories. Not as large as the White House would like, but they're victories nonetheless. So activity, some results, but the White House will, in the main, try to convey to the American public, because a lot of people are watching at this 100-day benchmark, that the White House is not only busy, but trying to fulfill its campaign promises.
All right, Chief White House Correspondent Major Garrett. Major, thank you.
Of course.